Question 1. The vestigial structure in human is, the word vestigial, here vestigial means remnant. It means remnant, or what is left off from an ancestral organism. The term vestigial can also refer to organs that were used in the ancestors of a particular organism but are currently not used in the organism. They are usually small or reduced. We see sometimes these organs are called vestiges. They are called vestiges. For example, in snakes, we see the bones of the pelvic and pectoral girdles, even though we know that snakes do not have forelimbs and hind limbs. So this question is asking us the vestigial structure in humans. That is a structure in humans that is not, or that does not perform a particular function, or that shows a relationship with another organism. The options now read earlobe, spleen, tailbone, the toe bone. Now, the spleen has its function in man. The earlobe has its function in man. The tailbone, also called the coccyx. The coccyx has no specific function in man. Of course, the toe bone still has its function in man. So our correct answer is the option C, the tailbone. Question 2. This diagram is an illustration of a structure in the skeletal system of humans. An individual was involved in a car accident and the illustrated structure was badly injured. Which of the following structures would most likely be affected? Now, let's look at what this entire diagram is. This is a diagram of the human skull. And given the correct answer here, we need to identify the organs that are housed or contained in the human skull. Now, this, of course, is the eye socket, which houses the eye. This is the nasal cavity, which supports the nose, the nasal cavity. And then this is the upper jaw and the lower jaw. The lower jaw and the upper jaw, which houses the teeth. And then this is the cranium, which houses the brain. So let's look at organs that are housed within this structure. They are the organs that will be badly affected by this accident. Clavicle is the collarbone. Collar is not located on the skull. The tongue is in the mouth. The pelvis is the part of the bone that supports the lower bones, or if you like, the the pelvic girdle. So this and this disqualify this option. The lumbar, now the lumbar is one of the bones of the vertebral column. So again, this is disqualified. Ear, the ear is housed somewhere here. The brain is housed under the cranium or within the cranium. Then the hinge joint is a joint that is found at the elbow and at the knee. So this one disqualifies it. Then option D, the eye, housed in the eye socket. The cerebellum, also called the little brain. The cerebellum is found at the hind part of the brain. The brain is divided into the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. So the cerebellum is part of the brain, so that means it's still housed here. And then, of course, the ear, which is here. So looking at these options, the structures that will be affected by this accident will be the eye, cerebellum, and the ear because they are housed by the skull. So our correct answer is the option D. Question 3. Different tissues in plants contribute to the support of the parts as a result of the following characteristics, except now malleability simply is the ability to be hammered into thin sheet, the ability to be hammered into thin sheet, or the ability to be formed into a particular shape. Now, malleability is a property of metals. Now, flexibility is an interesting feature of supporting tissues in plants. So this is a characteristic of a supporting tissue. Rigidity is another interesting characteristic of supporting tissues in plants. For example, the cell wall is very rigid. It's very rigid in order to provide support. So the characteristic here that is not typical of the supporting tissues of a plant is the option A, malleability. Question 4. Excessive loss of water from the leaf is prevented by option A, the parenchyma. No, the parenchyma strengthens the root and the stem. The vascular bundle is a collection of the xylem and the phloem. It does not prevent the loss of water. Now, the corticle, it's a unique covering on the leaves. It is usually pronounced in the leaves of xerophytes. Now, xerophytes are desert plants, plants that are found in the desert where water conservation is very important. We see the presence of waxy cortical. Even the leaves from the trees or plants found in the desert are characterized by waxy cortical. This structure is waterproof. It prevents the loss of water from plants. So our correct answer is the option C, cortical. Question 5. In animals, the main protective covering is found in the adipose tissues are fatty tissues found beneath the skin. The epithelial tissue is the tissue that is found in the most outer part of the body. So if you look at the skin, the outermost layer of the skin, the epidermis, has the epithelial tissues. So our correct answer here is the option B. Of course, bones are inside. In fact, the bones are also covered by the epithelial tissues. Bones are covered by the skin or the muscles. So our correct answer is the option B, epithelial tissues. Question 6. Lateral meristem in flowering plants is found in the... Now, to answer this question, we need to understand what lateral meristem is. Of course, the word lateral means the sides. So lateral meristem is found in the sides or on the sides of the stem. Lateral meristems are found on the side of the stem and the roots of plants. They are found on the side of the stems and the roots. And when you look at the side of the stem and the roots, the major feature there is actually the cambium. So the lateral meristem in flowering plant is found in the cambium, which is the major feature on the sides of the stem and the roots. So our correct answer here is A. Question 7. Muscles act in opposite directions in order to A. Regulate bodily activities. No. B. Prevent muscle fatigue. No. C. Cause a bone to move. And D. Prevent dislocation of a joint. No. Now usually muscles always occur in what we call an antagonistic pair. By the term antagonistic, we mean that they work in opposing manner. So if one muscle contracts, its opposite pair will relax. So it's by contracting and relaxing that muscles are able to cause bones to move. The bones they're attached to move. So our correct answer is the option C, that muscles act in opposite directions in order to cause a bone to move. Question 8. Muscles are attached to bones by means of. Now, muscles are attached to bones. So if this was to be a bone, and this happens to be a muscle, now muscles do not directly connect to the bones. There is a whitish cord. Called a tendon. So it is these whitish cords or tendons that serve as the connection between the muscle and the bone. So if this is our muscle at this point here, X, and at this other point here, X, will be our tendon. So muscles are attached to bones by means of strong whitish cords called tendons. So our correct answer is the option B. Question 9. The radius and the ulna are bones of the. Now, see, if you look at the pectoral girdle under the human skeleton, there's a single bone that forms the upper arm. That is the humerus. Now, attached to the humerus are two sets of bones. The one at the top is the radius, and the one at the bottom is the ulna. So the radius and the ulna form the lower part of the pectoral girdle. They form the lower part of the pectoral girdle, or if you like, the lower arm. The lower arm. So let's look at our options. Pectoral girdle, the lower arm, the upper arm, the pelvic girdle. So it's the lower arm. Our correct answer is the option B. Question 10. Study the list below and use it to answer this question. The vertebral column of mammals. Now, the vertebral column of mammals is also called the backbone or the spine. Now, the vertebral column of mammals consists of the following: the lumbar vertebra, the thoracic vertebra, caudal vertebra, cervical vertebra, and sacral vertebra. The options now says which of the following are found immediately next to the skull? Immediately next to the skull. Now, let's pretend that the skull sits like this. Now, the first set of vertebral bones are the cervical vertebra. This is then followed by the thoracic vertebra. Then the thoracic is then followed by the lumbar vertebra. And the lumbar vertebra is followed by the sacral vertebra. And finally, the sacral vertebra is followed by the caudal vertebra. So now, looking at this scheme, it means that immediately next to the skull is the cervical vertebra. That is the set of bones found on the neck, so that the skull comfortably rests on the neck. So our correct answer is cervical vertebra, which is labeled 4 here. So if we check our option, cervical vertebra, which is Roman numeral 4, is option C. That's our correct answer. Question 11. Study the list below and use it to answer this question. The vertebral column of mammals consists of the following: lumbar vertebra, thoracic vertebra, caudal vertebra, cervical vertebra, sacral vertebra. Which of the following articulates with the pelvic girdle? Which of the following articulates with the pelvic girdle? So this is the skull here. First set of bone is the cervical vertebra. Cervical vertebra is followed by the second set of vertebral bones called the thoracic vertebra. The thoracic vertebra is followed by the lumbar vertebra. The lumbar vertebra is followed by the sacral vertebra, and the sacral vertebra is followed by the caudal vertebra. Now, it says which of the following articulates with the pelvic girdle. Now, the pelvic girdle are the hind limbs, the bones of the hind limbs. The bones of the hind limbs. We're looking at the bones of the hind limbs, the femur, and then the tibia and the fibula. Now, these bones, or let's say the femur, connects to the pelvic girdle, the pelvis, and the pelvis now anchors onto the it anchors onto the sacral vertebra. The caudal vertebra is more like the tail, like also called the coccyx. There is no articulation or point of attachment here. So the pelvic girdle, which is the pelvis in this case, or the pelvic bone, articulates or attaches to the sacral vertebra and not the caudal. The caudal just hangs on its own. There is no attachment to any other bone because it's called the tailbone or the coccyx. So the attachment of the pelvic girdle is to the sacral vertebra, which is labeled number 5. And from our options, the sacral vertebra number 5 is option A as our answer. Question 12. Study the list below and use it to answer this question. The vertebral column of mammals consists of the following: lumbar vertebra, thoracic vertebra, caudal vertebra, cervical vertebra, sacral vertebra. Which of the following articulates with the ribs? Which of the following articulates with the ribs? Now, just after the skull, the first set of bones are the cervical vertebra. The second set of bones are the thoracic vertebra. The third set of bones are the lumbar vertebra. Then the fourth set of bone is the sacral or the sacral vertebra, and then the last set of bone is the caudal vertebra. Now the ribs are all connected to the thoracic vertebra. The ribs connect or attach to the thoracic vertebra. To the front, the ribs connect to the breastbone or the sternum. To the front of the body or to the ventral surface, the ribs connect to the breastbone, also called the sternum. And then to the back, the ribs connect to the thoracic vertebra. So if we look at our options, the thoracic vertebra is number 2. The thoracic vertebra is number 2, and number 2 in our options is the option B. Question 13. Support in young herbaceous plants is provided by, that's young flowering plants. Support in young herbaceous plants is provided by. Now, guttation, let's look at the meaning of each of these concepts. Guttation is the loss of water from plants in cold environments. It's a unique term. It's the loss of water from plants in cold environments. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules from where the water molecules are high in concentration to where the water molecules are low in concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. Now, turgidity has to do with thickness. When a cell or a tissue takes in so much water, it becomes turgid or thick, and it's able to support itself. Translocation is the movement of manufactured food from the leaves to the other parts of plants. So if we look at all these definitions, the only structure or process here that has to do with support is turgidity. So that gives us option C as our correct answer. Question 14. The above diagram represents a... Now, if you look at this diagram carefully, under supporting systems, this diagram represents the transverse section. This is the transverse section, or you can also call it a cross section of the root of a dicot plant. So this is a transverse section or a cross section of a dicot root, a dicotyledon root. So the fact that we have longitudinal here disqualifies this. Longitudinal disqualifies this. Now, okay, we have cross section also means transverse section, but like I said, this is the transverse section or cross section of a root. So stem disqualifies it. So our correct answer is the option C. And how we know that it's a cross section of a root? The question does not even ask whether it's that of a dicot or a monocot. It's because of the arrangement of the vascular bundles here, with a star-shaped pit. Question 15. The axial skeleton is composed of... Now, the axial skeleton is also called the central column of bones. The axial skeleton is also called the central column of bones. And it is so called because it provides central support. So it starts with the skull, and then it connects to the breastbone, and then the vertebral column, so let's look at the options. The radius and the ulna are bones of the lower arm. These ones fall under the appendicular skeleton. They are bones of the lower arm, so they fall under the appendicular skeleton. The atlas and the axis. Now, the atlas and the axis are bones found at the neck. They are bones found at the neck with the cervical vertebra. So they will form part of the unique bones found at the neck. Now, the skull and the vertebral column. This is the skull, and this is the vertebral column. Then the limbs and the girdles. The limbs and the girdles they fall under the appendicular skeleton. So I said atlas and axis are neck bones that allow rotatory movement, and they support the skull. So the bones that make up the axial skeleton here is the skull and the vertebral column from our diagram. That is the central support of the body. So our correct answer is the option C. Question 16. The axial skeleton is made up of the following. Now, the limbs and the limb girdles form the appendicular skeleton. That is appendages. The skull, the axial skeleton are actually also called the central column of bones. Forms the central support of the body. So from the skull, then we have the vertebral column, or what you call the backbone. So like I said, the limbs and the limb girdles form the appendicular skeleton, the skull, the vertebral column, the rib cage, and the sternum. Now, the rib cage is the chamber formed by the ribs as they connect to the back of the body through the thoracic vertebra and to the front through the sternum or the breastbone. Then the sternum is simply the breastbone. The lumbar and the thoracic vertebra form part of the vertebral column. They form part of the vertebral column. Then the vertebral column and the lumbar vertebra. The lumbar vertebra is part of the vertebral column. So our correct answer here is the option B. The option B, that is the skull, the vertebral column, the rib cage, and the sternum make up the axial skeleton. Question 17. The bone illustrated above is the now the part labeled 1 clearly looks like a ball. So if it's a ball, then we can clearly say that this bone would form a ball and socket joint. And a ball and socket joint is found in two main parts of the body. One of them is found at the shoulder, where the shoulder blade connects to the head of the humerus. And then the other one is found at the pelvis or hip, where the head of the femur fits into the acetabulum of the pelvis. So this is pelvis. Here, this is shoulder blade or the scapula. So the fact that it has a ball head, and then with this rigid surface here, this is clearly a femur. This is clearly a femur, which is the longest bone in the body. So our correct answer is the option D, femur. It's a femur because it has a ball-like head, which is able to fit into the acetabulum of the pelvis to form a ball and socket joint. Now, we did not pick the humerus because of the ridged surface here. The ridged surface here clearly shows the attachment for bones like the tibia and the fibula. The tibia and the fibula. Question 18. The bone that articulates with the part labeled 3. To articulate means to join. So the bone that joins with the part labeled 3. Now, the part labeled 3 is a cavity. This part labeled 3 is a cavity. The other one is here. Now, this cavity, or it's a groove, a cavity or a groove. Now it allows a bone with a ball to fit in. Now to actually determine which bone will fit in here, one, we need a bone that has a ball head, a ball, so that can fit in to form a ball and socket. Now we know that there are two major bones that have a ball head. One of them is the humerus, which has a ball head. The other one too is a femur, which has a ball head. Now that means our answer lies between the humerus and the femur. But now, how do we know which of them fits in here? We need to be able to establish what this structure is all about. Now this entire structure is actually the pelvic bone. This is the pelvic bone, or the pelvis. And if this is the pelvic bone or the pelvis, then the bone that fits into the pelvic bone or the pelvis is the femur to form the lower limb. So our correct answer is the femur. This cavity here is actually called the acetabulum. The acetabulum. So when the head of the femur fits into the acetabulum, it then forms a ball and socket joint, which is one of the locations of the ball and socket joint in the body. So like I said, our correct answer is the femur. The diagram represents the bones of the question 19. The diagram represents the bones of the. Now, if we look at this diagram carefully, we can clearly see two bones, one longer than the other, and at some point they are of the same thickness. This clearly tells you that you're dealing with the radius and the ulna. The radius and the ulna. Now, why are we not calling these tibia and fibula? The tibia and fibula are of unequal thickness. The tibia is very thick while the fibula is very thin. But you can see that these two bones are of equal thickness. However, the ulna is longer than the radius. So this is clearly bones of the lower arm. Bones of the lower arm. So our correct answer is option D, the lower arm. Question 20. The following are the functions of supporting tissues in plants, except A. Strengthening. Strengthening is a supporting function. Rigidity. Rigidity is a supporting function. Flexibility is a supporting function. Secretory. Secretory means to produce substances, to release substances. This is not a supporting function. So our correct answer is the option D. Question 21. The following are the functions of the skeleton except option A. Protection of delicate internal organs. Yes, the skeleton protects delicate internal organs. For example, the skull protects the brain, the thoracic cavity protects the heart, the ribs or the rib cage protects the lungs. Controlling growth rate in animals. No, growth rate in animals is primarily controlled by hormones and nutrition. And then C, maintenance of the shape of the body. Yes, skeletal structures maintain the shape of the body. In fact, the skeleton gives the body shape. And then option D, providing support for the body. Yes, skeletal structures provide support for the body. They provide a framework which act as a support. So the answer here is option B, which is controlling growth rate in animals. That is not a function of the skeleton. So option B is the answer. The function of the part labeled 1 is. Now, to answer this question, we need to identify what the part label 1 is. Alright, now these structures are typically the guard cells. So let's enlarge one of them and see what we have. So an enlarged version would give us something like this, where this is the guard cell itself. Of course, this is another guard cell. And then inside the cavity or the opening there is the stomata. Then inside the guard cells are chloroplasts, which of course are structures for trapping solar energy or absorbing solar energy. Okay, so let's look at the diagram. The structure labeled 1 is inside, clearly touching something inside, because I can see the structure labeled 4 is touching the guard cell itself. So the structure labeled 1 is actually touching structures inside. So that should be the chloroplast. So if the structure 1 is touching features inside the guard cell, that means structure 1 is the chloroplast. And the function of chloroplast is to absorb solar energy or trap solar energy for the purpose of photosynthesis. This means that from our options, the correct answer is the option D. So the option D is the answer. It is not controlling water loss. What controls water loss is the guard cell itself. That's structure 4. When the guard cell contracts and relaxes, it opens and closes the stomata, which will now determine whether water will leave or stay within the cell. So our correct answer is D, trapping solar energy. Question 23. The function of the part labeled 1 is to. Okay, now the part labeled 1, from what we can see here, is actually a ball. It's actually a ball-like head. It's a ball-like structure, and bones with ball-like structures usually fit into either the glenoid cavity of the pelvis, the glenoid cavity of the scapula, or the acetabulum of the pelvic girdle. Bones with ball-like heads like this fit into just two parts of the body. One of them fits into the cavity on the scapula, which is called the glenoid cavity. So this head fits in there to form a ball and socket joint, while the other bone that has a ball-like head fits into the acetabulum of the pelvis to form another ball and socket joint. Now we need to identify what this bone is. This particular bone, clearly because of the ridge on the surface here, this bone is the femur. That's the longest bone in the body. And if this bone is the femur, it means that its head will fit into the acetabulum of the pelvic girdle. So the function of part 1 is A, fit into the acetabulum of the pelvic girdle. We have our answer here, but let's check the others. B says fit into the glenoid cavity of the scapula, but like I said, this bone is not the humerus. It's the humerus that fits into the glenoid cavity of the scapula. This bone is the femur. So option A is our answer. Question 24. The function of the part labeled 1 is to now this is a typical cervical vertebra, and apart from the cervical vertebra, all the other vertebra, be it the lumbar vertebra, the thoracic vertebra, the sacral vertebra, the caudal vertebra, they all have this distinguishing feature. This feature label 1 is the neural canal, also called the spinal canal. Now, the neural canal or the spinal canal is a hole for the passage of the spinal cord. So let's say this is one vertebra, this is another vertebra, this is another vertebra, this is typifying the way the backbone are arranged, stacked on each other, starting from the cervical vertebra to the thoracic vertebra to the lumbar vertebra to the sacral vertebra and to the caudal vertebra. Now they all have this neural canal or spinal canal through which the spinal cord passes through. So the spinal cord is not exposed. The spinal cord is not exposed. It passes through the neural canal of the vertebra. By so doing now, the vertebral bone is offering protection or support. It is offering protection or support. So let's look at our options. Articulate with the adjacent vertebra. No, that is not the purpose of the neural canal. Carries the spinal cord. Not really carries the spinal cord. Well, let's look at other options. Provide support. Yes, provide support, because right now it is offering protection. The spinal cord is not exposed as it goes through the neural canal, so it's providing support and protection. This makes plenty of sense. D, provide surface for attachment of the muscle. No, the neural canal is not an articulating surface for muscle. It is just for the passage of the spinal cord. So our correct answer in this question is the option C. I am not going with option B, that it carries the spinal cord. It makes it sound somehow as if it's lifting. No, it's actually supporting it or offering it protection. Question 25. The inorganic components of bone consist of. Now, when we say inorganic, inorganic means mineral components, and not just mineral components, but components that are not of plant or animal origin. Not of plant or animal origin. It's the opposite of organic. Organic is plant or animal origin. So now let's look at our options. Option A says potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Now, magnesium and calcium are mineral components of the bone, but not potassium. Sodium, phosphorus, and calcium. Sodium is not a mineral component of the bone, but phosphorus and calcium are. Magnesium is a component. Phosphorus is a component. Calcium is a component. Of course, sodium disqualifies option D. So our answer is the option C. Magnesium, phosphorus, and calcium are mineral or inorganic components of the bone. Question 26. The labeled part that provides surface for the attachment of the tricep. Now, we need to identify what these bones are. Now, these bones are the bones of the lower arm. They are the bones of the lower arm. Bone 1 here is the radius, and on the radius, the muscle on the radius is the bicep muscle, while the bone here is the ulna, and the muscle on the ulna is the tricep. So it says the label part that provides surface for the attachment of the tricep. So the tricep will attach to the surface labeled 3. And that is option D as our answer. Question 27. The large intercellular air spaces that penetrate the tissues of most hydrophytes provide a pathway through which a plant hormone are transported to various parts. No, hormones are not transported through intercellular air spaces in plants. B, carbon dioxide absorbed by leaves can diffuse to the roots. Now, intercellular air spaces are spaces that allow for the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, but there's something interesting about this option here. It says carbon dioxide absorbed by leaves can diffuse to the roots. Now, carbon dioxide is actually needed by the leaves for photosynthesis and not by the roots. So, carbon dioxide is not transported to the roots. So, this part of the option disqualifies this from being our answer, because food is manufactured in the leaves and not in the roots. So, carbon dioxide is needed at the leaves and not the roots. Option C, salts absorbed by roots can reach. Now, salts are not gases. They are not transported via intercellular air spaces. Salts are transported via the xylem. So, no. Option D, now, oxygen produced in the leaves can diffuse to the submerged parts. Yes, this is correct, because the submerged parts cannot have access to oxygen. Plants cannot use oxygen that is dissolved in water. So oxygen from the air diffuses through the leaves and then finds its way through these intercellular air spaces into the submerged parts of the plant. So our answer is the option D. Question 28. The longest bone in the body, the longest bone in the body is the thigh bone. Also called the femur. Okay, it has a ball-like head. This ball-like head fits into the acetabulum of the pelvis. So this is the longest bone in the body. So our correct answer is A, the femur. Question 29. The major mineral present in the shell of mollusk. Now, the group of organisms called the mollusk, or members of the phylum Mollusca, are the snails. Of which most of them are shelled, or they have a shell covering where they use it as their home. Now, the major component of this shell is calcium. Calcium compounds form the major component of these shells. So our answer here is calcium. Question 30. The odontoid process is found on the... Okay, now this is an interesting projection that is unique to only one type of vertebra. Let me see if I can just give us a good sketch. So this is the centrum. This is the spinal canal or neural canal. Spinal canal or neural canal. Now, this gentle projection here is the odontoid process, and it is found in a special vertebra called the axis vertebra. The axis vertebra. Now, the importance of this odontoid process is that it attaches to the atlas vertebra. It attaches to the atlas vertebra in the neck, and that explains why the neck is able to carry out rotatory movement. So it's a point of attachment. This gentle projection is a point of attachment to the atlas. So this odontoid process is found in the axis vertebra, and that gives us option D as our correct answer. Question 31. The part labeled 1 in the diagram is called. Okay, first of all, let's look at this diagram. This diagram is clearly the epidermal layer. This diagram is the epidermal layer of a stem. So the opening, this shows us an opening. This clearly shows us an opening, and the opening in the stems of plant is called a lenticel, or lenticels for plural now. And this is just showing us an opening, so it's a lenticel. So if this is the epidermal layer of a stem, and for stems, the opening in stems via which water is lost or oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse is the lenticel. If it were a leaf, that opening would have been called stomata. However, like I said, this diagram is an epidermal layer of a stem, so this opening is the lenticel. So looking at our options, stoma, no, because like I said, this is not structure of a leaf. It is the epidermal layer of a stem. Cortex, no. Okay, lenticel, epidermis. Yes, it's an epidermal layer, but the arrow is pointing to the opening. So, and the opening is a lenticel. So our correct answer is the option C, lenticel. Question 32. The part labeled 1 in the diagram is for the attachment of. The part labeled 1 in this diagram is for the attachment of. Now we need to first identify what structure is this. The entire diagram is the structure of the scapula, or what you may choose to call the shoulder blade. Now, the part labeled 2 is a groove called the glenoid cavity, and it is for the attachment of the ball head of the humerus, that is the bone of the upper arm. So this region, which is the blade itself, is for the attachment of muscle. It's for the attachment of a muscle, as the shoulder muscles. So let's look at the options. Option A says shoulder muscles, of course. The biceps. No, the biceps are muscles that are attached to the bones of the lower arm, that is the radius and the ulna. Then the vertebral column, no. The ribs, no. The muscles that are found in between the ribs are the intercostal muscles. The intercostal muscles. So our answer here is the shoulder blades. That is option A as our correct answer. Question 33. The part labeled 1 is the part labeled 1. Now we need to identify what this structure is. This structure is the pelvis. This structure is the pelvis. We know it is the pelvis because we can see the obturator foramen, the obturator foramen, and we can also see the pubis. This is the pubis, and we can as well see, should be another one here too, we can see the acetabulum, which is the point for attachment of the head of the femur. So the structure 1 is not the lumbar, as the lumbar vertebra is the point of attachment. The lumbar vertebra is around the lower abdominal, the abdominal region, and then the sacrum attaches to the entire of the pelvis, and then the pubis, I just labeled it here. So our answer is the option A, the ilium. That is the name of that process there. Question 34. The part labeled 2 in the diagram. The part labeled 2 in the diagram. Now, the first thing we have to identify what this structure is. Now, this structure is the transverse. This is the transverse section, or what you may call the cross section. Of a dicot root. This outermost layer here, is the piliferous layer, and then the second layer here is the cortex. And the portion labeled 3 is the phloem, which is responsible for the transport of manufactured food. And then the star-shaped region inside is the xylem. Which is responsible for the transport of water and mineral salts. Okay. Now, of course, this last structure here is the endodermis. Now, the question is asking us the structure labeled 2. So the structure labeled 2 is the cortex. This very large vacuum here is the cortex. So that's option C as our answer. So it is important that you note the transverse section of a dicot root and that of a monocot root. Understanding the difference between them would go a long way in helping you answer questions of this nature. Question 35. The part labeled 2 is there. All right. Now, looking at this diagram carefully, if you look at the part label 1, it's touching structures within the guard cell, and such structure is the chloroplast. Chloroplasts are located within the guard cell, and then structure 4 is pointing at the guard cell itself. Structure 4 is pointing at the guard cell itself. So structure 2 is actually pointing inside the stoma, that is the opening of the guard cell. So our answer here is the stoma. So that gives us option A as the answer. Question 36. The part labeled 4. Again, we need to identify what this diagram is. This is the transverse section of a dicotyledon or a dicot root. The first structure here is the piliferous layer. The second layer, this huge vacuum here, is the cortex. And then the layer within this region where we have the star-shaped structure is the phloem, which is responsible for the conduction of food or manufactured food. And then the star-shaped structure itself is the xylem, which is responsible for the conduction of water and mineral salt. And then, of course, 5 is the endodermis. Now, the question is asking us that the structure labeled 4. So the structure labeled 4 is the xylem, which is responsible for the conduction of water and mineral salt. You need to note the diagram of a transverse section of a dicot root, the transverse section of a dicot of a monocot root. Knowing the differences will go a long way in helping you to answer questions of this nature. So our correct answer is the xylem, option D. Question 37. The part of the mammalian skeleton illustrated in the diagram is the part of the mammalian skeleton illustrated in the diagram is the. Now, this is a vertebra. Now, what type of vertebra it is would be influenced by its basic features. Now, if you observe carefully, this is the only vertebra that has 4 vertebratorial canal. 1, 2, 3, and 4. These tiny holes here, they are called the vertebratorial canal. This is the only vertebrae that has it. And then it has a gentle neural spine, a gentle or not really pronounced neural spine. Now, the only vertebra that this structure typifies is the cervical vertebra. The cervical vertebra found in the neck. So our answer to this question is cervical vertebra, option C. Question 8. The piece of bone represented in the diagram is found in the. Now, this bone, you can see them 2 halves. This bone, this clearly is the pelvis. This is the pelvis. This is the right pelvis. This is the left pelvis. We know it is the pelvis because we can actually see the part labeled 3, that is the acetabulum. We can also see the obturator foramen, and we can also see the pubis, this joint here. We can as well see the ilium. So if this is the pelvis, that means it is the pelvic girdle. It is the pelvic girdle. This should be the pelvic girdle of a rabbit. This should be the pelvic girdle of a rabbit. Okay, so our correct answer is the pelvic region, which is option A. Question 39. The stems of a young herbaceous plant are kept upright mainly by. Now, for a stem to be kept upright, it needs to be very rigid. It needs features that will make it very rigid. And one of the ways that a plant stem can attain rigidity is when it is engorged with water. When it is engorged with water, there's so much water in its cells such that it's able to exert a backward pressure on the stems, and that keeps it very firm and upright. Now, this phenomenon is called turgor, or it's called turgidity, and turgidity is brought about by turgor pressure. When the plant cells take in so much water that the water now begins to exert a backward pressure on the cell wall, so that gives the plant a turgid structure. So our answer from this information is turgor pressure, option A. Question 40. The structure labeled A represents. Now, to start with, what vertebra is this? This is the lumbar vertebra. We know it is the lumbar vertebra because of its prominent transverse process, one transverse process, another transverse process, and then we also see also a prominent neural spine, and then there's a centrum as well. Now, this structure labeled A is characteristic of all the vertebra. This is to enable the spinal cord to pass through. So the structure labeled A is called the neural canal or the spinal canal. So our answer here is the option B, which is one of the names for it, either the neural canal or the spinal canal. Question 41. The structure labeled 2. Now, this is a typical bone. This is a typical bone, and from what we can clearly see here, this is the humerus. This is the humerus, the bone of the upper arm. You can see the ball-like head, and now the thick part of the bone, that is the part structured to, is called a shaft, which is a distinguishing feature of bones. So the structure labeled 2 is the shaft. Option C is our correct answer. Question 42. The structure that will be stained blue-black by iodine is labeled. To answer this question, let us consider the blue-black coloration due to the addition of iodine. Starch is the substrate that produces a blue-black coloration when it comes in contact with iodine. So if we are to look for the part or the structure that will be stained blue-black, we should be considering the part where photosynthesis will take place, because photosynthesis will bring about the production of food in the form of starch. Then we ask ourselves the question again, what structures will carry out photosynthesis? The structures that will carry out photosynthesis are the chloroplast. Then we ask ourselves the next question, where are the chloroplasts found in this structure of the plant, of the leaf? Now, the structure labeled 1 their structures are inside the guard cell, and the structure inside the guard cells are the chloroplast, because the structure labeled 2 here is this. So this is the stoma. This is the guard. 4 is the guard cell itself, and then 1, the structures are inside the guard cell. And in the typical structure of guard cells, we have the chloroplast inside them. We have the chloroplast inside them. So the part will be in the part labeled 1, because this is the chloroplast, and that's where food will be formed. So our answer is the part labeled 1. Option A. Question 43. The thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity is the upper part where we have the lungs. So this is lungs. This is another lungs. So the thoracic cavity, just a space where here is separated from the abdominal cavity. This is the abdominal cavity now. Abdominal cavity by a sheet of muscle called, now the pericardium is simply the bag of muscle of tissue that covers the heart. This one covers the heart. The intercostal muscles are muscles that are found in between the ribs. They are found in between the ribs. The pleural membrane, no. So the diaphragm is the band of muscle that actually separates the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity. It is involved in helping the lungs to expand and relax during gaseous exchange. So our answer is the option D. It's called the diaphragm. Question 44. The thoracic vertebra differs from all the other vertebrae by the possession of. Now, we need to understand the structure of the thoracic vertebra. The thoracic vertebra is unique for the following. Just look at my diagram. It is more like a kettle or a lamp, then it has a very long, pronounced neural spine. It is known for a long, prominent neural spine. This is its distinguishing feature, a long neural spine. It's the only one that has this very pronounced neural spine. The odontoid process is the distinguishing feature of the axis vertebra. A large centrum is also a distinguishing feature of the axis vertebra and the lumbar vertebra, while the vertebratorial canal is a distinguishing feature of the cervical vertebra. So the long neural spine is the distinguishing feature of our friend, the thoracic vertebra. So that gives us option A as our answer. Question 45. A total number of caudal vertebrae in animals X and Y is 4 and 27 respectively. 4 and 27 respectively. The animals are likely to, so animal X has 4 caudal vertebra. The caudal vertebra is found at the tail region. and then animal Y has 27. So for an animal to have just 4 caudal vertebrae, this animal is either without a tail or has a very short tail. And then for an animal to have 27, it means that the tail must be very long. Now let us look at our options. Well, for a fact, the caudal vertebra of man is actually 4. For a rabbit is 16. So clearly this animal is not a rabbit. But let's imagine that you do not know the animal. Now let's apply the knowledge I just talked about, that if the caudal vertebra is found around the tail region, then this must be an animal with a short tail or a rudimentary tail or no tail at all, while this must be for an animal with a long tail. Now let's look at our options. The toad and the rat. The toad, no, because this is a feature of mostly the mammals. Toad and fish, again, no. Humans and rat, fish and human. Now, like I said, humans have exactly 4. Then it would, if the rabbit has 16, the tail of the rat is longer, so it will make sense for option C to be our answer. Humans have 4, and then rats will take 27. So our correct answer is the option C. Question 46. The upward movement of the sap in the xylem vessel is brought about by. Now, sap is a mixture of water and mineral salts. So the upward movement of cell sap in the xylem vessel, and you see, we know that the xylem is responsible for the transport of water and mineral salt. Now, what causes the xylem to move, the sap to move all the way from the roots to the stem and then to the leaves of the plant? Capillary action, no. Capillary action is not sufficient to move cell sap. Guttation is simply the loss of water from the leaves of plants in cold environments. And then transpiration stream. Transpiration on its own is the loss of water. When plants lose water, the process is called transpiration. Now, since cell sap contains water, transpiration stream is a collection of both water and mineral salts moving up the plant. Osmosis is the movement of only water molecules from where the water molecules are high in concentration to where the water molecules are low in concentration. So based on this information, our correct answer is the option C. Question 47. The xylem elements perform the function of transport, but they also help to support plants because now, to be able to carry out the function of support, a tissue or an element involved in this function should have rigid, thick walls, so that it will provide firmness. It would provide rigidity. So looking at these options, to be internally located, no. Tubular, no. Have rigid cell or thick walls, correct. So our correct answer is the option C, because it is a requirement for a supporting tissue or supporting element. Question 48. This diagram is an illustration of a structure in the skeletal system of humans. The illustrated structure is a part of. Okay, now the human skeleton is divided into 2 parts: the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. Now, the axial skeleton forms the central column of bones and consists of the skull, the vertebral column, that is the backbone, and then the ribs, or if you like, the rib cage, and the sternum, that is the breastbone. The rib cage and the sternum, while the appendicular skeleton simply consists of the pectoral girdles, that is the bones of the forelimbs, and the pelvic girdle, that is the bones of the hind limbs. Now, looking at this classification scheme, let's now look at where the skull falls in. The skull falls under the axial skeleton. So our answer here is the option A, axial skeleton. Question 49. To form a ball and socket joint, structure label 1 fits into another structure in the scapula. The structure labeled 1, now this structure labeled 1 is the ball, and it's supposed to fit into a socket-like structure in the scapula. So if this is the scapula, this head, which is the ball head, fits into this cavity or groove in the scapula. So the ball fits into the socket to form the ball and socket joint. Now this cavity is called the glenoid cavity, and this bone is the humerus, or the bone of the upper arm. So our answer here is the glenoid cavity. So option B is our answer. Question 50. Water vapor is lost in plants during transpiration through, now plants lose water through two basic organs, through the leaves and the stems. These are the two basic organs that plants lose water, and majority of the water is lost through the leaves. Now, the openings in the leaves via which the water exits the plant are called the stoma or stomata, while the openings in the stem via which water leaves the plant are called lenticels. So let's use this knowledge to answer the question. Water vapor is lost in plants during transpiration through stomata and lenticels. That is correct. Xylem simply conducts water and mineral salts. Parenchyma is a supporting tissue. Sclerenchyma is also a supporting tissue. So our answer is the option A. Question 51. What type of vertebra is represented in the diagram? What type of vertebra is represented in the diagram? Now, the vertebra that has this very prominent transverse process, two prominent transverse process accompanied with a prominent neural spine, is the lumbar vertebra. The lumbar vertebra, which is found at the abdominal region. So our answer is the lumbar vertebra, option C. So it is important that you acquaint yourself with the structure of the typical cervical vertebra, thoracic vertebra, lumbar vertebra, sacral vertebra, and the caudal vertebra, and be able to distinguish between the atlas and the axis vertebra, which are found in the neck, to go a long way in helping you with questions involving the types of vertebra. Question 52. Which of the following bones forms a joint at the point labeled 2 in the diagram? Now, let's identify this bone. This is the scapula or the shoulder blade. Now, this is the blade itself. The part labeled 1 is the blade itself. The part labeled 2 is a groove or a cavity called the glenoid cavity. The glenoid cavity. Now, this glenoid cavity provides an articulating surface for the head of the bone of the upper arm. And the head of the bone of the upper arm is a ball-like structure. This bone of the upper arm is the humerus. So the humerus head will fit into the glenoid cavity to form a ball and socket joint. So using this information, we now know that the bone that forms a joint at the point labeled 2 would be the humerus, that is the bone of the upper arm. Question 53. Which of the following bones is illustrated in the diagram? Which of the following bones is illustrated in the diagram? Now, it's unique with the presence of the glenoid cavity or the groove where the humerus, the head of the humerus, fits into to form a ball and socket joint. And then we can clearly see the blade-like structure, and that's why it's called the shoulder blade as the common name, or you can call it the scapula is the technical name. So based on this information, our correct answer is the scapula, option C. Question 54. Question 54. Which of the following constitutes the main internal tissue of a leaf? The main internal tissue of a leaf. Now, the cuticle is the waxy covering on the leaves. Waxy covering on leaves that prevents the plants from losing so much water, especially for xerophytes. That is, desert plants. They have thick, waxy cuticles. The vascular tissue is simply the phloem, a collection of the phloem and the xylem. The phloem is for the conduction of manufactured food, while the xylem is the transportation of water and mineral salts. Then the lower epidermis is just an upper layer. The lower epidermis is still an upper layer of the plant tissue because the epidermis is the outermost layer. So the lower epidermis is still an upper layer of a plant tissue. Now, the internal tissue is called the mesophyll. The mesophyll. So our answer, based on having knowledge of all these other terms here, is option B. Question 55. Which of the following groups carry out similar functions in living things. Okay, now let's look at this. A vertebral column performs a function of support. That's the backbone. Chitin provides support. It is the component of the exoskeleton in a group of animals that belong to the phylum Arthropoda. Your crabs, your spiders, your insects, their exoskeleton is supported by chitin. Now, the guard cells control the opening and the closing of the stomata, so they do not perform the function of support as chitin and vertebral column. Now, tendon, they are the white tiny cords that connect muscles to bones. That's support. Chitin also support, but neuron is a cell that transmits neural impulses. So this is not support. So this one differs here. Then sclerenchyma is a supporting tissue in plants. Cartilage is a supporting tissue in animals. It is found in between bones so as to prevent the bones from rubbing against each other. So it acts as a shock absorber. It's a supporting tissue. Chitin is a supporting tissue in the exoskeleton of arthropods. So here all of them are performing supporting functions. But let's look at option D. Collenchyma is a supporting tissue in plants. Intercellular space is for transport. A blood vessel is for transport. So this is the only one performing supporting function here. So its own function differs from these two that are involved in transport. So the only option here that has structures or features that perform the same function or similar function is option C, where we have sclerenchyma, cartilage, and chitin. Question 56. Which of the following groups contains a non-supporting structure in animals? In non-supporting structure in animals. Okay, now the pellicle is a supporting structure found in some animals. It is synonymous to the skin. The pellicle is found in organisms like the paramecium, which are animal-like protists or protozoa. Then chitin is found in the exoskeleton of arthropods, which are animals. Bone is found in the vertebrates. So all these ones have supporting structures in animals. So this cannot be an answer. The femur is a bone, is a supporting structure in animal. The pellicle is synonymous with the skin, which I said is found in animal-like protists or protozoa like paramecium. It's also found in the euglena. And I said the pellicle is synonymous to a skin. And then chitin, also a supporting structure in animals. The humerus, supporting structure in animals, the ribs, and the cartilage are all supporting structures in animals. Cartilage is a supporting structure in animal. Bone is a supporting structure in animals. Now, the pseudopodia is not a supporting structure. The pseudopodia is a structure that is used for both locomotion and feeding in the amoeba. It is formed when the animal wants to move. So let's say this amoeba wants to move to point A. It would stretch out its cell membrane, and then cytoplasm will flow into this region to thicken it, so that the animal now attaches to the substratum and drags its body until it gets to point A. Also, when the amoeba wants to feed, if there's a food particle at this region, it extends the pseudopodia or the cell membrane to form a pseudopodia until it gradually encircles the food into a food vacuole. So it is not a supporting structure in animals. So our correct answer is the option D, because of the presence of the pseudopodia there. Question 57. Which of the following groups of vertebra have two branches at the end of their transverse process? Clearly looking at this question, So the two branches at the end of their transverse processes is clearly found in the lumbar vertebra. This is the lumbar vertebra and it has two branches. So our correct answer is the option A. So being able to answer this question has to do with you understanding the structure of the bones that make up the vertebra. Question 58. Which of the following hind limb bones is equivalent to the humerus of the forelimb? Now, let's look at how the structure of the humerus of the forelimb looks like. The humerus, it has a ball-like head. This is the ball-like head. The ball-like head allows the head of the humerus to fit into the glenoid cavity of the scapula to form a ball and socket joint. Now, another bone that has a similar structure is the femur, which is the longest bone in the body. The femur also has a ball-like head, and the ball-like head now fits into the cavity on the pelvis. The cavity in this case is called the acetabulum. The acetabulum, as against the cavity in the scapula that we call the glenoid cavity. This one is the acetabulum. So the only structure that has a similar, that is equivalent to the humerus of the forelimb, is the femur. So the femur has a ball-like head. It will fit into a cavity and it will form a ball and socket joint. The humerus also has a ball-like head. It will fit into a cavity called the glenoid cavity and it forms a ball and socket joint. So our answer is the femur. Question 59. Which of the following is not a component of the appendicular skeleton? So the human skeleton or the vertebrate skeleton is divided into two parts: the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. And the axial skeleton consists of the skull, the vertebral column or the backbone, and then the rib cage and the sternum or the breastbone, while the appendicular skeleton consists of the pectoral girdle or the bones of the forelimbs. That is the so here you have bones like the radius, the ulna, the humerus, the scapula or the shoulder blade. Then we now have the bones of the pelvic girdle. Here we have bones like the pelvis itself. We have the femur. We have the patella or kneecap. We have the tibia. We have the fibula. So let's look at our options. Which of the following is not a component of the appendicular skeleton? Now, the pelvic girdle, that is this now itself, one of the sections of the appendicular skeleton. Now, the atlas is found, is one of the bones that make up the vertebral column. Is one of the bones that make up the vertebral column. So the atlas falls under the axial skeleton. The ulna is one of the bones that make up the pectoral girdle. The femur is one of the bones that make up the pelvic girdle. So the only bone here that is not a component of the appendicular skeleton is the atlas, which is a bone that makes up part of the vertebral column. So our answer is the option B. Question 60. Which of the following is not a function of the mammalian skeleton? Is not a function of the mammalian skeleton. Option A says contracts and relaxes to bring about movement. Now, it is muscles that contract and relax to bring about movement. It is muscles that contract and relax to bring about movement, not the mammalian skeleton. But let's look at the other options. B provides a framework on which internal organs are suspended. Now, this is a true function of the mammalian skeleton. For example, in the thoracic cavity, the heart is suspended there. So we see the heart in the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity suspends the heart. The rib cage suspends the lungs. In fact, the pelvis fills the ovaries in female animals. So this is a function. It gives the body its shape. Yes, skeletons give the body shape and beauty. Just imagine your body without a skeleton. Option D, protects soft and delicate parts of the body. Yes, this is also a function. For example, the cranium or the skull protects the brain. So our answer that is not a function of the mammalian skeleton is the option A, based on the information available to us. Question 61. Which of the following is not a skeletal tissue? Now, the three main skeletal materials are bone, cartilage, and chitin. The bone is the solid mass that muscles connect with to bring about movement. Bones also protect other soft organs or tissues. Then the cartilage is a connective tissue that is found in between bones to provide a cushioning effect. It acts as a shock absorber so that bones do not rub against each other during movement, as this could result in wear and tear. And then chitin is the exoskeletal material that is found in animals that belong to the phylum Arthropoda. That is the insects, the spiders, that's the arachnids, the myriapods, and the crustaceans. So based on this information, the structure here that is not a skeletal tissue, of course, bone is a skeletal tissue, cartilage is a skeletal tissue, chitin is a skeletal tissue, so it's the plasma. The plasma is the liquid part of the blood. The plasma is the liquid part of the blood, which consists of primarily water and then dissolved nutrients, hormones, enzymes, antibodies are all found in the plasma. So our correct answer is the option B. The plasma is not a skeletal tissue. It's a component of the blood. Question 62. Which of the following is not a tissue found in plants? Now, the epidermis is the outermost tissue of plants. The phloem is the tissue responsible for the transport of manufactured food. That process is called translocation. That's the transport of manufactured food from the leaves to other parts of the plant. The process is called translocation. Now, while the xylem is responsible for the transport of water and mineral salt. Transport of water and mineral salts. And I said the epidermis is the outermost covering of the plant tissue. Now, the dermis is not a plant structure. It is an animal structure. So based on this information, our correct answer is the dermis, option A. Question 63. Which of the following pairs of tissues is responsible for strengthening the plant? For the function of strengthening the plant is same as a supporting function. So all supporting tissues will carry out the function of strengthening the plant. Now, the major supporting tissues in plants are 4 in number. Let me list them: parenchyma, sclerenchyma, collenchyma, and the xylem. These are the 4 supporting tissues in plants. So let's look at our option. It's asking us which of the following pairs of tissues are responsible for strengthening the plant. So we have to look for an option that carries at least 2 of these 4 supporting tissues in plants. Phloem is not a supporting tissue. Epidermis, no. Parenchyma is a supporting tissue, but the cambium is not. Collenchyma is a supporting tissue, but the cambium is not. Collenchyma is a supporting tissue. Sclerenchyma is a supporting tissue. So based on the available information, our correct answer is the option D. Question 64. Which of the following parts of the skeleton does not have a protective function? So the ribs forms the rib cage, and when the ribs form the rib cage, within the rib cage we have the lungs being protected there. The pelvis protects the ovaries in female animals, the ovaries. Then the carpals are the digits. They are the digits. The skull protects the brain. So from this information here, the structure that does not perform a protective function here are the carpals, which is option C. Question 65. Which of the following plant parts does not perform a supportive function? Does not perform a supportive function. Now, the 4 main supporting tissues in plants include collenchyma, sclerenchyma, parenchyma, and the xylem vessels. So let's look for an option that does not have any of these, or has something that is not among these listed supporting tissues: sclerenchyma, xylem, and collenchyma. This cannot be our answer because they are all supporting tissues: epidermis, sclerenchyma, and xylem. The epidermis is not a supporting tissue, but let's read through the other options. Parenchyma is supporting, collenchyma supporting, sclerenchyma supporting tissue, cannot be the answer. Parenchyma supporting tissue, xylem supporting tissue, collenchyma supporting tissue, cannot be the answer. So the only option that has a tissue here that does not perform a supporting function is option B, because of the presence of the epidermis. So our answer would be option B. Question 66. Which Question 66. Which of the following sequence, that is the order, sequence means the order, is the correct arrangement of tissues in the anatomy of a young dicot stem? To really be able to answer this question, you need to understand the anatomy of a dicot stem, the transverse section of a dicot stem, and also the anatomy of the the transverse section of a monocot stem, so that you can differentiate, because the arrangement of the tissues for dicot stem and monocot stem are different. Now, for a dicot stem, the arrangement from the inside starts with the pit. From the pit, the next is the xylem, which is responsible for conducting water and mineral salt. From the xylem, now we move on to the cambium. From the cambium, we move on to the phloem, which is responsible for the transportation of manufactured food. And then from the phloem, we move on to the collenchyma, parenchyma, and the epidermis. Collenchyma, parenchyma, then epidermis. Now let's check which of them takes this format. Now, okay, clearly I can see pit in option A and pit in option D, so our answer is between A and B. Now let's check which one follows this order. Clearly is option D, pit, xylem, cambium, phloem. So our answer is the option D. Question 67. Which of the following statement about the modifications of the pentadactyl forelimb is not correct? Now, this structure is trying to talk about one of the evidences of evolution, homology and analogy. Analogy. Homologous structures, these are structures that are similar in design, but they perform different functions. They are adapted to perform different functions. So we want to look at what these structures are modified to perform. So let's start with option A. Flippers are modified for grasping in sharks. Now, sharks do not have flippers. Flippers are found in animals like penguins, whales. What sharks have here are fins. And also, sharks are unable to grasp. So this option does not, it's not correct about the modification of pentadactyl limbs. But let's check the other options. Wings are modified for flying in birds. This is true. This adaptation is for function. Arms are adapted for grasping and holding in human beings. That is true. Legs are modified for walking and running in antelopes. That is also very true. So option A is not correct about the modifications of pentadactyl forelimbs. So our answer is A. Question 68. Which of the following statement is correct? Okay, looking at these options, this question is dealing with the bicep muscle and the tricep muscle. And I can also see bones of the upper arm, humerus, and lower arm, ulna. So let's see how we can draw a diagram of the pectoral girdle. So let's pretend that this is my scapula. So this is the shoulder blade or scapula. This cavity here is the glenoid cavity. That is the groove that the head of the humerus fits in. So this is the humerus. or the bone of the upper arm, and then the humerus now makes contact at the top. So this is the radius, and then at the bottom it makes contact with the ulna. Now here at the front we have the bicep muscle. Now if you look carefully at my diagram, the bicep muscle originates from the scapula. It has 2 points of origin. Both of them are on the scapula, and then I need to label this bicep. The bicep originates, and this bone here is my humerus. Quite a complicated diagram. So it has both its origin on the scapula, and then it connects to the radius. So bicep muscle has all its origin on the scapula and terminates at the radius. So now let's check for the tricep is behind. Now the tricep has 1 point of its origin on the scapula, then the other origin is on the humerus itself, and then it goes all the way and then connect to the ulna. Okay, so this is tricep. Now from this diagram we can see that the tricep originates part from the scapula and part from the humerus, while the bicep originates entirely from the scapula. And then while the bicep connects to the radius, the tricep connects or inserts in the ulna. And for the elbow to bend, as it shows in my diagram, the bicep needs to contract. The bicep here needs to contract, while the tricep here needs to relax. So when this happens, the bicep now pulls the bones together, bending the arm. So let's look at our options here. Option A, the biceps muscle is inserted at the ulna. Now the bicep, from what we can see, is not inserted at the ulna, it's inserted at the radius. It's inserted at the radius, so this option is not correct. Option B, the tricep muscles originated at the scapula and head of the humerus. This is a tricep. We can see it originating from the scapula here and also originating from the head of the humerus here. So this option is correct. Now, but let's look at option C and D. The bicep muscles have their origin on the head of the humerus. The bicep, we can see, have their origin all at the scapula. So this is not true. Option D, the ulna is pulled up when the bicep is relaxed. The ulna, from what we can see here, is not pulled up when the bicep is relaxed. The ulna is pulled up when the bicep actually contracts. So this is also not correct. So our correct answer is the option B. Question 69. Which of the following Question 69. Which of the following statement is not correct about the functions of each group of mammalian vertebra? All right. The vertebra starts, so if this is the skull, the vertebra starts with the cervical vertebra. The cervical vertebra supports the skull. After the cervical vertebra is the thoracic. So cervical. The thoracic vertebra is the point of attachment to the ribs at the back, while to the front the ribs attached to the breastbone or the sternum. Then we have the lumbar vertebra. The lumbar vertebra provides a surface for the articulation of the abdominal muscles. Then we have the sacral vertebra. The sacral vertebra connects to and supports the pelvis. And then we have the caudal vertebra, which does not attach to anything. So let's look at our option. Option A says sacral vertebra supports the skull. Now, clearly, this is not true. The skull is supported by the cervical vertebra from what we just said. Cervical vertebra supports the neck. That is true. Lumbar vertebra provides attachment for abdominal muscles. That is true. Thoracic vertebra articulates with the ribs. That is true. We said all this. The sacral vertebra, we said, provides a supporting or articulating surface with the pelvis. So this is our answer because it is not correct about the functions of each group of vertebra. So our answer is the option A. Question 70. Which of the following statement is true about the movement of the forearm? The movement of the forearm. So if this is the humerus, this is the radius, and this bone is the ulna. Now, for this, the forearm to move, and let me be specific about bending. For the forearm to bend, as we're seeing it in this way, the bicep, which is here now, the bicep is here, while the tricep is here. You can actually demonstrate this. The tricep, for the arm to bend, the bicep needs to contract. And as the bicep contracts, the tricep will relax because they work as an antagonistic pair. And if it needs to straighten out, then the opposite needs to happen. So this is for bending. The bicep needs to contract while the tricep relaxes. So let's check our options based on this information. Straightening the arm, both biceps and triceps will contract. Both of them cannot do the same thing. Like I said, muscle pair operate as an antagonistic pair. So this does not agree. Option B, straightening the arm, the biceps contract and the triceps relax. No, this does not bring about straightening of the arm. Anytime the bicep contracts, from the illustration I showed here, it means the arm is going to bend. So this cannot be an answer. Bending the arm, the biceps contract and the triceps relax. This is very true. Option D says bending the arm, the bicep relax. No. So our correct answer is the option C. The bicep contract and the tricep relaxes. So our correct answer is the option C. Question 71. Which of the following structures does not function as support in animals? Okay, the cortical in arthropods is a supporting structure. Just like in plants, where desert plants have waxy cortical covering their leaves to protect them from loss of water, arthropods, especially arthropods in the desert, also have their own version of cortical on their exoskeleton. This is also to protect them from the loss of water. So it is a water conservation structure, and also provides mechanical support from mechanical injuries. Scales in birds does not perform a supporting function. Now, cartilage is a supporting tissue in mammals found in between bones or vertebra to provide a cushioning effect so as to prevent the bones from rubbing against each other. So, supporting function. Then body fluids in earthworms. Now, earthworms possess what is called a hydroskeleton. Where their body fluids contract and relax. The movement of the body fluids actually bring about not just movement, but gives the body a very solid structure. When the fluids move back and forth, they provide fluid pressure, and that actually provides support. So it's called a hydroskeleton or hydrostatic skeleton. It's generally found in a group of worms called that belong to the phylum Annelida. That is the segmented worms. Phylum Annelida. There you have the earthworms, you have the palulu worms, you have the leech, Hirudo medicinalis. So the only structure here that does not function as a support in animals is scales in birds, and that is the option B as our answer. Question 72. Which of the following structure is not a skeletal material? There are three basic skeletal materials: cartilage, which are found on the surfaces of bones where joints are located so as to provide a cushioning effect or serve as a shock absorber so that the bones do not rub against each other. Second one is the bone, which offers rigidity, gives shape, and also protects some delicate organs. And then the third skeletal material is chitin, which is found in the exoskeleton of arthropods. Now, the muscle is not a skeletal material, so our answer here is the muscle. It is not in the list of animal skeletal materials. Question 73. Which of the following structures is not present in the vascular bundles of a dicot stem? Now, vascular bundle here simply means xylem and phloem. And then our emphasis here is on a dicot stem. Now, if we look at the structure of a dicot stem, which will actually take me a while to draw, when we look at the structure of the stem, generally in the stem, when the cambium is present between the xylem and the phloem, so the cambium is between the xylem and the phloem, it is called an intracameral intrafascicular cambium. Intrafascicular cambium. Now, then when it is also found, now, so supposed to be the primary xylem and the primary phloem. Now, the interesting thing here that differentiates the intrafascicular cambium from the interfascicular cambium is the fact that the interfascicular cambium here, it's also found in between xylem and phloem, but the interfascicular cambium here forms medullary rays, what we call medullary rays. If you look at the structure, you will see the medullary rays, and these medullary rays are only found in a dicot stem. They are only found in a dicot stem. In a dicot stem, you don't find this in a monocot stem. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is that interfascicular cambium is found in a dicot stem, while intrafascicular cambium is found in a monocot stem. And the distinguishing feature here is not where the cambium is located. No, it is the formation of a medullary ray. While the interfascicular cambium forms a medullary ray, the intrafascicular cambium does not form a medullary ray. So the question is, which of the following structure is not present in the vascular bundle of a dicot stem? So clearly it is an intrafascicular cambium. That is the option B. Xylem is found in all of them. Phloem is found. So this one is found in the dicot stem. So our correct answer is the option B. Quite a lengthy explanation. Question 74. Which of the following structures occupies the neural canal of the vertebral column? The neural canal of any vertebra, let me just use one vertebra to explain this. Let me use the lumbar. The neural canal is the hole, also called the spinal canal, because that hole is the hole through which the spinal cord passes through the vertebral column or the backbone. So which of the following structure occupies the neural canal is the spinal cord. The medulla oblongata is actually the part of the spinal cord that just enlarges to form the brain. So the medulla oblongata is a part of the brain. It is the first portion of the brain just after the spinal cord. So it does not go through the backbone, it's exposed. The hypothalamus is also a region of the brain. It's not part of the spinal cord. And the cerebellum is also a part of the brain. In fact, the word cerebellum means little brain. So this option B, C, and D, or medulla oblongata, hypothalamus, and cerebellum are parts of the brain and cannot go through the spinal canal. So our answer is A, the spinal cord. Question 75. Which of the following does not offer support in plants? There are 4 basic supporting tissues in plants: collenchyma, sclerenchyma, parenchyma, and xylem vessel. So let's look at the options. We'll look at an option that is not among the 4 supporting tissues in plants. Sclerenchyma is a supporting tissue, collenchyma is a supporting tissue, xylem is a supporting tissue. So the meristem is not a supporting tissue. So our answer is the option D. Question 76. Which of the following tissues does not provide support in flowering plants? Flowering plants are also called herbaceous plants. Now, flowering plants, the 4 supporting tissues, parenchyma, sclerenchyma, collenchyma, and xylem vessels are found in herbaceous or flowering plants, and they are all supporting tissues. And the question is asking us which of the following tissue does not provide support in flowering plants. Parenchyma provides support and is found in flowering plants. Collenchyma provides support and is found in flowering plants. Xylem provides support and is found in flowering plants. The phloem does not provide support, even though it's found in flowering plants. It's simply for the movement of or the transport of manufactured food. So our correct answer is the option A. Question 77. Which of the following vertebra provides articulating surfaces for the ribs? The surface for the ribs to attach to. So if we look at this, if this is the skull, the first set of vertebra is the cervical vertebra. This one supports the neck. The next set of vertebra is the thoracic vertebra. The thoracic vertebra provides an articulating surface for the ribs towards the back now, because towards the front, the ribs are attached to the sternum or the backbone. So to the back, the thoracic vertebra provides an articulating surface for the ribs. Then the third vertebra here is the lumbar vertebra, which provides an articulating surface for the abdominal muscles. Then we have the sacral vertebra, which provides an articulating surface to the pelvis. And then finally, the caudal vertebra that does not provide any articulating surface for mammals. For humans now, because we don't have a tail. But while for the mammals with tails, it supports the tail. So clearly here, it is the thoracic vertebra that provides an articulating surface for the ribs. So if we look at our options, thoracic vertebra is the option D as our answer. Question 78. Which of the following will ease the friction? Ease here means will reduce the friction between the ends of bones. So if I have a bone here and I have another bone here, structure of a joint, there's a tendency that these bones can easily rub against each other. Now there is a cartilage on the surface of the bones. There's a cartilage on the surface of the bones. And then the bones are connected by the ligament. The ligament connects the two bones. Then the cartilage acts as a shock absorber, provides a cushioning effect. However, in between, in the vacuum here, is a fluid called the synovial fluid. The synovial fluid is a lubricant. It lubricates the joints, because without the synovial fluid, even the cartilage will wear away. So the synovial fluid acts as the lubricant, just as we have lubricants in machine parts. to reduce friction. And the question is saying, which of the following will ease the friction? Will ease the friction. So from our options here, the synovial fluid is our answer. Option B. Question 79. Question 79. Which of the following parts articulates, that is, joins with the head of the trochlea to form a hinge joint? To form a hinge joint. The head of the trochlea is the head of the humerus. The humerus has a ball-like head, and then so this point here is the trochlea, and it joins to the part labeled 2. It joins to this part labeled 2 to form a hinge joint. That is a joint that allows only to and fro movement in one direction, back and forth or to and fro. So the region labeled 2 is the point of attachment of the trochlea. If this is the humerus, so this option 2, part 2 is the option A as our answer. Question 80. Which of the following labeled part is made up of dead cells? Dead cells. Dead cells will typically be found in the outermost part. Now, this is the structure of the epidermis of a plant. Epidermis of a plant. The epidermis is the outer part of the stem, or the outer part of the stem now. The structure label 1, this opening is the lenticel. This opening is the lenticel. Now, just like in the case of the human skin, the cells on the surface of the skin are always peeling off because they are the ones that are exposed to abrasion. The cells here as well in region 2 and 3, they are closest to the surface. So most of them are dead cells. As these dead cells form, they gradually fall off. So where we can have dead cells here are points 2 and points 3, and that is option 2 and option A. Answer. Question 81. Which of these is not a part of the appendicular skeleton? So the human skeleton is divided into 2 divisions, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is made up of the skull, the vertebral column or the backbone, and then the sternum or the breastbone and the rib cage. The appendicular skeleton on its own is made up of the pectoral girdle, that is the bones of the upper arm, the pectoral girdle, the bones of or the forelimbs now. Pectoral girdle, or what we call the forelimbs, we're looking at the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the shoulder blade, and then the pelvic girdle. We're looking at the pelvis, the femur, the tibia, and the fibula. So this is also called the hind limbs. So using this classification scheme, which of these is not part of the appendicular skeleton? Now, the clavicle is also called the collarbone. The clavicle or the collarbone is the bone that connects the shoulder blade. It connects the shoulder blade. It's a connecting point between the shoulder blade and the vertebral column. So the clavicle is an appendicular skeleton bone. So this is not the vertebral column. We can see it here. It falls under the axial skeleton. So of course this will be, well, let's check option C and D. The scapula is a bone that falls under the pectoral girdle. The femur is a bone that falls under the pelvic girdle. So clearly the bone here that is not part of the appendicular skeleton is the vertebral column or the backbone. So our answer is the option B.